Hello, hello, hello. It's 2 p.m. and that means it's time for the Insight Teen Hour. My name is Elton with Insight Treatment Programs. Right now you're listening to your hometown station, KHTS 98.1 FM and AM 1220. With us today, we have a special guest all the way live from the UK. His name is Srab Harutunian. Srab, how you doing, brother?
I'm good. Thank you, Elton. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much for joining us all the way from the UK. So, Srab is a qualified therapist in the UK who works with addictions. Srab is passionate advocate for raising awareness when it comes to addiction and recovery and everything involving that. And what we're going to do today is we're going to let Srab just kind of give us his story, tell us what it was like for him, and and then we'll get into some questions and answers. And for everyone out there listening, I'm glad you're joining us. So Srab, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks again, Elton. Before I start, I just want to thank Insight Treatment Programs for giving me the opportunity to come on. Thank you to yourself and Frederick and the team, and thank you to the listeners out there as well who have signed on to have a listen to the show today. So I guess a little bit about myself and how I've ended up in the position to be a therapist and specialising in addiction. Myself, I'm in recovery. And really for myself, I'm passionate around. There's a quote, a saying that I really like. Why pull bodies out of the river when we can go upstream and stop them from falling in the first place? And that really rings home true to me when it comes to addiction and the youth of today and the generation before us and our generation.
Right.
Some of the unfortunate circumstances that we find ourselves in as in early childhood and teens and adolescence in those years. So I think for me, really, a lot of it boils down to trauma. Trauma is something that can be. It's not something that can be compared one trauma to another. One person's ceiling is another person's floor. But it's how the individual perceives and responds and reacts to that situation.
Right.
For myself, I think for what really distorted my view of the world around me at a young age was I was about 5 years old at school. And I'd borrowed a pen. It was my first year of kindergarten or primary school or whatever. And I borrowed a pencil off one of the boys. And the next day, this boy's father came into the public school toilets, which in today's day and age, there's no way a parent would be allowed on site without some sort of, secure method or whatever.
Right.
But this parent came into the toilet. He came in and I was actually on the urinal and he started hurling a load of abuse at me, racial slurs and very angry, very agitated, telling me to, go back to my own country. So as a 5-year-old, I immediately thought I'd done something wrong because I took this boy's pen. Whether I took it knowing that I wasn't going to give it back, I can't even remember.
Mm-hmm.
But as a 5-year-old, it distorted my perception of the world because I recall from that moment on, I carried that feeling of a feeling of shame with me. So growing up in an ethnic background, my parents taught me to speak bilingually, and when they would speak Armenian, which is our mother tongue from roots, I would get angry and I'd act out and I'd lash out at my parents. Don't speak to me like this. Don't speak to me. Speak to me in English. And I think that for me was the first experience of trauma. As a 5-year-old to do that, because what it did is it separated me. I didn't know where I belonged anymore. I didn't feel like I belonged at home. I felt different at school. And don't get me wrong. Over the years, I still, I was still a loving son, but there was a part of me missing. There was a void. And it's only later on in life that I've understood how significant that point was for me. And I guess, from my own background, my father's line of business was hospitality. So he had restaurants and hotels and bars. and I would see him drinking, and he would be happy and socializing. But when he wasn't, he was kind of more insular and not as sociable. And I think subconsciously I associated belonging with drinking and socializing with friends. And fast forward a few years to, early teens, I started smoking weed, and my behaviors weren't necessarily in line with how I would like to have seen myself, but unfortunately, that's life in some ways. And as my teens progressed, I started, dabbling in different, whether it was rave culture, the ecstasy, and cocaine came out. And, my background as well, it's I was provided for. My parents worked hard. They brought the money home, and, whatever I really wanted, it was there. But what I know today is the external stuff never meant anything. It never would have gratified me enough. It never would have filled what was missing inside of me, that sense of belonging.
Right.
And I think that's where at some point, about 17, a situation occurred where I got accused of doing something in school, which it actually wasn't me. And everybody in the class actually signed a piece of paper after I'd been expelled to say I had nothing to do with it. The school came back and said, "We apologize. Would you like to come back?" And that moment was the point where, again, my life took it derailed for about 4 or 5 years. Because I felt abandoned and rejected from school, from society, from my family. And, luckily, by the grace of God, I call it, at 21, I got myself into university, and I got a qualification in business marketing and finance. And I found a path in building chemical manufacturing for about 16 years.
Wow.
But one thing that I didn't do over the years of my work was I didn't, it was like having a wound and just putting a Band-Aid over it. For me today, my understanding of addiction, there's so much trauma that's related to it, and the triggers that come with it.
Absolutely.
And over the years, I would dabble in different substances, and I was kind of like a rock and roller. I traveled a lot. I worked hard. I played harder.
A Rolling Stone, if you would, huh?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, I'd travel, 10,000 miles to Brazil just so I can go to Carnival and have a blowout for 4 or 5 weeks with my buddies and, that kind of stuff. But in between those extravagant lifestyle, I would work solidly. It's only today that I realized how my addiction was playing out.
Right.
Because I do believe that it's a combination. I believe myself, I'm born with an addictive personality, and if not kept under check, it can be obsessive, compulsive, and impulsive.
Absolutely.
Now put a drink or a substance in me, and all bets are off. That's kind of how I look at it today. And by the end of my kind of addiction, I never had an outlet. So from a young age, I was told not to. Men don't cry, boys don't cry.
Right.
Be a man. Don't show emotions. And I get it. For some, that may work. For some boys and some men, that's okay. When not one size fits all. But for this sensitive soul who's talking down the radio show right now, I think that for myself, I needed a different approach.
Right.
And unfortunately, the lack of that approach, of that sensitivity towards me, steered me down the wrong path.
Absolutely. No, I was just going to say that culturally, even though you're all the way in the UK, culturally, Armenians and my culture, the Mexican Hispanic culture, we get taught that, right? Don't cry, men don't cry, stuff like that. So we learn how to bottle up all these emotions, which I totally can attribute to my addiction as well. So I totally understand.
Yeah. Yes. And just kind of going to where I am today in terms of how I got to it. By 2017, I'd ended up of a breakdown of a marriage. my daughter and my ex. Hadn't seen my daughter for 3 years, and it seemed like everything that I was doing, I was in this kind of vicious cycle. I would gain momentum, I would grow, I'd grow in strength and consistency, and then for some reason I would self-sabotage and something would go wrong. I often look at it like, without, a flower, when a plant starts to die, you can water it all you want. You can do whatever you want. It's not going to grow. You have to remove it from its environment and replant it in fertile soil. And that was kind of the situation for myself in early 2016. And that was where my transformation truly began, and I got into recovery and started to learn more about myself. I wanted to develop internally, not externally, because I'd kind of done that. I'd got the shiny things, the cars and the houses and the traveling. None of that meant anything. There was no value to it. The real value comes from internal peace and serenity. It took a long time for me to get to the point where, I can say now today I'm not far shy of 4 years, and I'm a qualified therapist, and I'm giving back to society, and I'm helping others to kind of gain awareness around it, around addiction and the consequences of what can happen if they open that door. I'm very passionate about this. I've in my recovery, I discovered I have a talent because, for some of us who fall into the trap of an addiction doesn't discriminate. You can be from any walk of life, and if it gets you, it's got you. And the untapped potential in whether it's a youngster, a teenager, an adolescent, or an adult, the untapped potential in us is in everyone. And I guess there's a saying, the one thing I had to change was everything, and the one thing I put down and I got everything. So now I'm a music writer, I'm a storytelling, alternative, hip hop, spoken word artist, I'm a therapist. And, I guess for the first time in many years, I never really was content with life, and I'm at peace with everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
I went through. Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, there's just small delay because of the distance, I believe. No, I was just going to say you're absolutely right. Once we stop living for material objects and we start looking inward and we find that serenity and that tranquility, life just becomes absolutely better. You said you have 4 years now in recovery. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of the stuff that I've learned by introspection and reflection is, the victim mentality that I kind of carried through life. Okay, I experienced some unjust situations, experiences that no child or adolescent or teenager should ever experience, feeling rejected and abandoned, and rightfully so, But it took, for myself, 20 years for me to really gain that personal responsibility to actually look at my part in this and go, okay, it happened, but yesterday's rain shouldn't stop tomorrow's sunshine for me. And
I love that. I'm stealing that.
And I think, and I think a lot of kids, especially now with social media and the kind of intense life, everything being consumer based and, trying to impress all, it must be so difficult for them to try and find their place where they can truly fit in. But one thing that I do know, Elton, is that, without that unconditional support, without violating their feelings and giving them positive attention and encouragement rather than the opposite, how can we call that not watering them? It's that the ultimate purpose is to feel connected to people.
Absolutely. 100%. Which brings me to a question that I have. So, your recovery, so we know you're in the UK. Where exactly are you at?
I'm in Manchester.
Manchester. Now, what's the NA vibe over there? Like, is there a big NA community?
Yeah.
I know there's a conference usually every year out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a number of different 12-step programs and mutual aid groups. But myself, I'm NA. So I went through the 12 steps,
Right.
and today I sponsor, and I work with guys trying to get clean, and we do, I go to regular meetings and there's conventions, and yeah, of course, without mutual aid groups like the 12-step program, I don't think I'd ever I would never have got to where I am today.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's very important to have that community, that type of fellowship. Obviously, we know in the program we need our sponsors in order for us to tell them our deepest, darkest secrets when we work our fourth
Yeah.
step, and that's huge. A couple questions for you. Growing up in the UK, being of Armenian descent, I mean, I know that
Yeah.
your first trauma that you remember was, someone telling you to go back to your country and stuff like that, which we
Yeah.
face on a daily basis out here. But what was that like for you growing up? And it's just, I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of people wouldn't think that there's that type of racism in the UK. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think racism, I'm not sure. I can't speak for anybody else, but I think today more than ever, there's more and more awareness and information out there that, racism does exist everywhere. It
Right.
exists, and it's a reality. I think for me, that one early trauma that I did have at 5 years old was only reinforced as my years progressed, and I forgot to mention that. So at 24, I actually moved to Armenia, and I set up a business out there and went through about a 5-year stage of being successful. I run a successful business, and I was employing 25, 30 people a year, 25, 30 employees, and everything was good, but in one sense, all I was doing was just channeling my addictive personality into work, into my exercise. There was with no understanding or awareness around this.
Right.
But my reasons for moving was because of my victim mentality. I left the UK because I blamed society, I blamed my family, I blamed, the racism, I blamed institutions. And the interesting part is here, Elton, is wherever I went, once I got to Armenia, when I left Armenia after about 7 years, I left with the same pattern. I left blaming society.
Right.
I blamed the institutions. I blamed my family. It was their fault why I ended up in Armenia.
Yeah, well, we always need a scapegoat,
yeah.
right? Whenever we try to escape or we try to do things and they don't go our way, especially when we're living in addiction or some types of those addictive personality behaviors, we always tend to try and blame others instead of really looking at the person at fault, and that's usually ourselves. So
Right.
I totally get it.
Right.
Now, when you moved to Armenia, was it to escape addiction from the UK or?
No, I think I was just running away from myself with no awareness. So essentially, it was trauma. When people hear trauma, Elton, a lot of the time people kind of stereotype it with it being sexual or physical, and we often ignore that the impact that an emotional and psychological trauma has on children, teens, and adults.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of the decisions that I made in my life earlier on were invisible. And I didn't know why I was making a decision. It felt like the right thing to do, but the premise of which the decision was coming from was based on being wounded, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, totally.
And I know I'm not alone in this today. That's one of the things, just in the UK, there's I think, 4 million young people have had symptoms of poor mental health, just during the pandemic. The number of the drug usage in the UK during the pandemic has just gone through the roof.
Right.
And my aim is really to try and get into schools and colleges and to try and nip it in the bud before, like I said, to stop them from falling in. Because this is a hardcore illness. And it really does kill people.
Absolutely.
For those that come out on the other side, we're very far and few between. But we have a clear-cut message that change is possible, but it has to come from the inside. It can't come from outside, whether you want to try and move houses, towns, cities, countries, continents, buy all the shiny things. None of that's going to work, until we look at the internal things like our triggers and managing our cravings and building useful tools, trying to find gratitude and relaxing techniques, working on our stress management, finding a support group. I'm going to use an example here of the support group that I mean. So, my addiction took me to opiates by the end. I think it was 2008-9. And my justification was my reason behind it was because I didn't have an outlet. Somewhere I could go to and get the insight and the wisdom So I was in the shower one day and I tried opiates. It was, I think, a Vicodin or a Tramadol, and I'd felt that feeling. And whatever drug that I took at whatever stage, it was always the one that got me. This is going to be the back. I'm going to, save the world with this. Everything's going to be okay. But my justification for it was, I've done that many stimulants over the years that I've had that many heartbeats, but if I carry on doing what I'm doing, I'll probably die at this age. But if I do opiates now, it'll slow my heart rate down. I'll live just as long as everybody else. Now, that one thought that I said then, it landed, it embedded, and I carried that for 12 more years until I got into recovery.
Wow.
That's the power of the thoughts that, as an adult who hasn't really fully developed, but imagine as a teenager, the same thoughts, but having an outlet to be able to share what's going on for them internally, what the consequences of that can be.
Yeah. The lies we tell ourselves to keep us going, right?
Right.
All right. So, Srab, that was a good transitioning segment, what you just discussed. We're going to take a short commercial break right now, but when we come back, I want to touch on how you manage your cravings, what you're doing for your relapse prevention, stuff like that. So,
sure.
Yeah, like I said, we're going to take a short commercial break. We'll be right back. You are listening to the Insight Teen Hour on your hometown station, KHTS, FM 98.1 and AM 1220. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Insight Teen Hour. I'm your host, Elton, from Insight Treatment Programs. And on the line, we have Srab, all the way from the UK, talking to us about his experience, strength, and hope, what he's doing out in the UK to help prevent addiction in teens. And you are listening to your hometown station, KHTS 98.1 FM and AM 1220. Now, Srab, before we went to break, you were discussing managing cravings, relapse prevention, life improvement, and stuff like that. So why don't you go ahead and touch on a little bit of that and what you're doing now in your recovery in those areas?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Elton. Yeah, so, I mean, I can sit here today confidently, coming up to where I'm at in my recovery, and say that, again, by the grace of God, I don't have cravings. Today the cravings are gone. But I do know the power and the risk of not being fully enmeshed in my recovery program and the consequences that can come out of that. I often say this actually regarding the triggers. So if anything that really still I have to work through, it's managing my triggers. And quite often I hear people say, well, how can we avoid our triggers? And for me, it's not about, I never advise or suggest anything for people to avoid their triggers. For me personally, it's we have to work through our triggers. Once we can identify what our triggers are, the awareness is there enough for us to do something about it. And hopefully our recovery is solid enough where we have the support network around us. We have a voice today, an outlet, and we can do what's necessary. Initially early in, of course, the people, places and things that would like trigger the cravings, whether it was going out with friends for a meal and they would be having drinks, or, going past a certain part where you knew you'd be able to score from. Those are obvious triggers to avoid. We can't avoid the internal trauma triggers, I guess, that, because it's the response to that. And as an example, I'd say I could have been triggered when I hear racist, the news about racism and immigration and stuff like that, things like that on the news.
Right.
I can still feel triggered. I still feel triggered when my parents speak to me in Armenian on the street. It's still a trigger for me. It brings up feelings and emotions.
Right.
What the difference is today, I have awareness around that, and I can manage those feelings. In terms of managing my cravings earlier in, I think by the time I think everybody reaches that point in addiction where we say it, don't we, in recovery, jails, institutions, or death.
Correct.
And the only way out of it is full surrender. It's admitting beyond a shadow of a doubt, conceding that it's got the better of us. It's more powerful than we are. And for me, I had to surrender to my thoughts. I realized that my thinking was the issue, and I needed to rewire my brain almost, and find that power greater than myself.
Right.
I guess earlier in emotionally, I was stunted. I think having that 5 or 6 year break in Armenia where, I wasn't, I was kind of developing in other ways, that allowed me to grow a little bit more emotionally and mentally. But really I was still, my inner child needed a lot of work doing, and I think this is what I share quite a lot as well. In my first couple of years, I really got stuck into the program. That's all I did. I did meetings, step work, sponsorship. I shared at every meeting I went to, as difficult as I found it. And I started to try new things. That what they call it, becoming a yes man.
Right.
The things like go for a coffee. And if you said to me 7, 8, 10 years ago, go for a coffee, and I said, what, spend $7, $8 on a coffee? What the hell are you talking about?
I could use that to go get high.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I've got better things to do with that $7.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
But it was trying new things. Go bowling, maybe try a drama class, a theatre group, and it was through these activities that I actually wrote my first poem. And writing my first poem was me connecting with myself, really around the same period that I was doing my step work. So it was kind of like I'm getting in touch with myself here. And, I had a passion for music, an interest for it. And one day my friend said, we're going to do some jamming. Would you like to come along? And really, deep down, I thought I'm going to go there, one thing on a guitar and a keyboard, and, and I'm going to be singing Lionel Richie on karaoke machine or something like that. That's the best I can offer.
Right.
But I got there and I thought, what? I felt something in me was speaking to me and telling me, maybe write something about your life in a kind of like a hip hop format. And 2 weeks later, I wrote my first song, and from there again, that was another outlet for me. That's what my music is. My lyrics are. It's part of my, I guess you'd call it, inner child work. It's me healing. It's me seeing things that I might miss by just keeping it inside and allowing my thoughts just to kind of run around, like a hamster in a cage. It's my outlet.
Yeah, that's your form of journaling, right? We
absolutely.
We're taught in recovery as well. Depending on your sponsor, it's always good to journal day to day, maybe once a week. But some people, actually journal in a journal, and others, such as you and myself, we take music as an outlet, and that's what you did, and that's an amazing thing.
Yes.
So that was your first poem. Is it safe to say that you've continued doing that and now have a lot more to offer?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, certainly do, Elton. Yeah. So I think that was would have been mid 2019, and by then obviously we all got into this lockdown and
Right.
COVID hit, so everyone was kind of indoors, and I used that time really. I really used that time for self-reflection and for growth, internal work, and at the same time, bearing in mind I was doing my 12-step mutual aid groups, and I was developing my studies in counselling and psychotherapy. And also I was journaling, I was writing music and finding that time and space for introspection and reflection. And before I knew it, I'd wrote, 16, 20 songs, and I ended up writing one which was very powerful, which was very meaningful to me. It was about the Armenian genocide. And as soon as I wrote that, I wrote it in 25 minutes. I remember January the 6th, it was about 9 p.m. And I remember writing it in 20 minutes, and I found a beat that went with it, and I couldn't even perform it in the car on my own without bursting into tears and getting really emotional. Right. And I knew in that moment that had to be recorded properly. And that's what I did within a couple of months. I filmed, produced a couple of tracks and put out, a YouTube channel and, a Facebook page and Instagram page and started putting it out there on social media. And in the space of about 15, 16 months, I've number 5. I think I've released 5 music videos, 3 of them addiction, recovery, spiritual related. One of them another one about the Armenian genocide, and one about, which I've called A Cold World, which is kind of my thoughts and feelings around my view of the world. The greed and the corruption and the poverty and the war and the tragedy that we see day in, day out.
Right.
Throughout our whole lifetimes, and that's just me speaking my truth to the world. And it's given me so much purpose and meaning. And I think that's really essentially what was lacking from my childhood.
That's a beautiful thing to hear, that you were able to channel all that into the music, and the writing and the producing and the filming of the videos. I actually got to watch one prior to, just to kind of do a little homework on our guest. I did watch the Powerless video that you put out, and I just got to say it's amazing work. It's an awesome message, and it's a beautiful thing to hear. I did want to ask you, when you left Armenia and came back to the UK, what got you into the therapy role? Because I know you had mentioned you went to school for business years before. So what got you into wanting to become a therapist?
Essentially, it was, I remember I was... I fell into the role of my business and the manufacturing, the building chemicals, and what essentially that was a mask, because I could walk into a room crowded with people and do a presentation and it was a mask. It was this identity that I on the outside, I was showing that I was intelligent, I was smart, and I was, eloquent. But really internally, inside, I felt lost and I didn't really know who I was. And I think coming into recovery on this side and having the opportunity to work on myself, really, because when I got into recovery this time in 2016, I realized that I really had to kind of give up the, surrender to everything on the outside.
Right.
And then that's where therapy kind of just fell in. And I didn't plan to go into therapy, Elton, but at the time, there's a saying, if it feels like home, open the door.
Right.
And I was fortunate that I could identify the feelings when I started to do the steps, and I was working on myself. So when it felt right, and I still do that, if it feels right, I open that door, and that's what therapy was for me.
And here we are years later, and you continue to do it.
Absolutely. And I feel so privileged and humbled and grateful beyond words. Each day that I wake up, I could have gone, into war stories and told you this and that and what happened. And really, that's not really my message. My message is hopefully to the parents out there who are listening to this today that, most importantly, it's just not to give up on your kids, right. Because I know kids can be, anyone like any of the kids were like mine, they can be rebellious and hard and stubborn and they don't want to listen and, but really they're crying out for help. They're crying out to be heard and supported and encouraged. And I think that's my message really more than anything. Unfortunately, I dragged my parents through this for 20 years.
Yeah, same here.
And I don't think it doesn't need to be that way.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think we were kind of talking about this before the show over the phone was, back when we were teenagers, I mean, at least for you and I know that we didn't have any positive role models. I don't know if, at least where I grew up at the time, I didn't know of any, insight treatment programs, if you will, any type of outlets for teenagers at that age. Between the ages of 13 and 18, all I knew growing up was running the streets and doing drugs and hanging out with the wrong crowd. So for you to be able to do that now and give back is an absolute beautiful thing.
Yes, it truly is. It is. And I'm going to kind of say, because I'm sure there are parents out there who believe really sincerely that they are the positive role models for their kids. And they might well provide for them financially and send them to good schools and buy them the computer at Christmas or whatever it is they're asking for. But really, there are so many kids out there that are, like I said, the trauma is the emotional and psychological. Where's the support emotionally for the kids?
Right.
If a kid doesn't feel emotionally supported, you can give them everything they want on the outside. It's going to go to waste, potentially.
No, absolutely. And if they don't have the outlets as well, we're going to see a lot of these kids go down that wrong path. And, it's going to show itself even further in the years to come when they are hit with the heavy addiction and all the other things that life throws at us when we become adults and join the real world, right?
Yes.
So I think we're going to get ready to go into another break right now, Srab. About another 1 or 2 minutes for a commercial break. When we get back, we'll give some closing statements. We'll give out some information on how they can reach you out in the UK. And,
Sure.
So once again, you're listening to the Insight Teen Hour. I'm Elton, your host from Insight Treatment Program, and you're listening to your hometown station, KHTS 98.1 FM and AM 1220. We're now back at the Insight Teen Hour. Once again, I am your host, Elton, with Insight Treatment Program. You are listening to your hometown station, KHTS 98.1 FM and AM 1220. We are back with Srab from the UK. Srab, you still with us?
I'm still with you. Thanks, Elton. Yeah, I'm here.
Absolutely. I just wanted to say I really appreciate you staying up. I know there's a 8-hour difference over there. It's almost 11 o'clock out there, correct?
That's right. Yeah, 11 p.m.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
but what a pleasure it's been to come on the show. Honestly, what a pleasure. Thank you.
I truly appreciate you coming on as well. I think when we left off, we were talking about how you got into becoming a therapist, and I love the fact that you touched back when you had said you went to Armenia to escape. We call that out here. I don't know if you guys call it the same out there, but we call that like a geographic, right? Where we try to leave a certain area, which I did back in 2014. I tried to go up to Sacramento, but there I go, there I am. It only took me 6 months until, methamphetamine caught up with me. So I totally understand what that's like. But how has that been coming back? And like I said, becoming a therapist and I don't know, forgive me, but are your parents still with us, and have you made an amends with them, and how's that going?
Yes, yeah. Okay, so, I mean, what I forgot to mention was after Armenia, I didn't come straight back to the UK. I actually ended up in Thailand for 3.5 years before I moved back.
Talk about a geographic,
The reason why I went to Thailand, the reason why I ended up in Thailand really was fear. That was the first, I guess, they say often addiction is fear-based as well, isn't it? A lot of our decisions are based on fear, false evidence appearing real. Right. And I think that fear of being judged and, having accumulated so much over the years while I was living in Armenia, successful business going down the pan to coming back to the UK with nothing. There was all that false pride and ego and fear that was holding me back. So my thinking at the time was, well, I'll go to Thailand and maybe the sun and the sand and the beach and all that will improve my lifestyle. So it took me another three years from 2014 for 2.5 years till 2016 to finally kind of decide, okay, I need to move back home and I really need help here. So when I moved back, it was obviously it's one of the best decisions I ever made. And I think really going forward from there, that was really the start for me, Elton. You know, in terms of my recovery process, I kind of realised that the decisions that I was making were just causing me continuous problems, and being able to surrender and say, look, show me the way. I'm here now. I'm listening. My way isn't working. Was the start, I guess. Sorry, can you remind me what else was it you asked as well in the question?
Oh, that was just about your parents, and if they're still with us, were you able to make amends with them, and how's your relationship with them now?
So obviously part of the amends were part of the steps and the 12 steps is to make amends, and obviously it's laid out in a particular order.
Right.
You know, and my biggest amends were first and foremost to myself, and obviously my family. And yes, my parents are still here. And only recently, actually, I've literally a week ago moved back home with my parents. My dad's very unwell. He's kind of like end of life situation. So I've made the decision to move back home and be the son that I should have been all of these years. Because these mottos and the sayings that we have in recovery, today, like keep it simple, do the next right thing, and the next right thing happens. Whereas back in the day, the belief system that I had, was out of sight, out of mind.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm abroad, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter what parents think. They're not seeing what I'm up to.
Right.
Whereas today I actually show up and I'm authentic and I'm real, I'm genuine. I'm sincere, I'm compassionate, understanding. I can be present for my parents. And that means a lot to them.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's a huge thing. I lost my father back in March due to kidney failure. He was a full-blown alcoholic and drug addict his whole life too. So, but the wonderful thing, I was able to make an amends with him for everything that we both went through, and he was able to make one with me while he was in hospice, and it's just one of the best feelings to be able to say you're sorry before they go and be riddled with that guilt or what if and that could haves, man. So that's totally a beautiful thing that you're able to be home and be the kid that you always knew you could be, and your parents always knew you could be.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry for your loss as well, Elton.
I appreciate that.
Did you? Hopefully, your father got to see you clean.
Oh yeah,
and doing this stuff, and that's kind of like the what drives me forward today. So my daughter, my son, my mum, my brother, they see me clean, and I know they can sleep tonight with ease. Not worrying if I'm going to be dead in the morning or what situation I'll end up in.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a beautiful feeling.
And I know we're short of time when we're coming to the end, but I guess I kind of just wanted to, end on this as well, if I could. The recovery. Why I'm so confident about my recovery today is because today I have built a life that I do not want to escape from.
Right.
Whereas before, for so many years from childhood, that's all I wanted to do. Now, whether that came from a place of having no say in what I should be doing, or no control of my life because my life was being dictated to me from family and society, through the 12-step program and through treatment, the unconditional support and love, it's allowed me to improve my life and really find out who I actually am. And add on to that the therapy side as well, understanding the psychology behind what makes me tick. Right. It's been groundbreaking. So, just for today, as we say, I am very, very confident that I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I don't need to escape from it.
And that's absolutely perfectly said, because for many, many years, that's what we did with the addiction, and everything that we were doing was trying to escape a reality. And now, living our clean lives, like you said, and I couldn't have said it better myself, we're living a life now that we don't want to escape from, and every day we wake up is a blessing, and for these 24 hours, at least for me, and I know for you, just hearing you speak, Srab, is, these 24 hours, we do the best that we can, and we give back the best that we can, and we try and spread the message of recovery everywhere we go. I know that's what I do.
Yes, and the way that I guess going back to my music, the way that I spread the message today is through my social media, and and thank you for this opportunity for this as well, Elton. It's my music performing name is Mancunian Bars, so it's MANCUNIAN space BARS. You can find me on YouTube, on Instagram and Facebook. All my videos are uploaded onto YouTube, and I think between them all, it's had a substantial amount of views, and I'm proud of my work because there's a real message in it, and whether you've been through addiction or not, or somebody in it, but I can hand on heart tell you this: there's a message in there, and it really strikes a chord with people. So
Absolutely,
please, if you can have a listen and subscribe and follow and help spread the word.
Yep. That's beautiful, Srab. Thank you so much for joining us. Join us every Monday at 2 p.m. for the Insight Teen Hour. I'm Elton, your host for the Insight Treatment Programs. You're listening to your hometown station, KHTS 98.1 FM, AM 1220. Thank you,